We're live, coming to you from everywhere with all the producers. Hello, my name is Peter Doria. I will be your moderator for today's panel. You might have recognized my face from the panel before in design. I'm coming in clutch for this one, yo, because something happened and now I'm here. So we're going to go around and figure out who are these people. So we're going to start. I'm going to go in the top left to the bottom right because it seems fair. Sorry, Aaron. Yes. Okay, so first off, we're gonna know who are you and what do you do, Aaron?
Me? Oh, okay. So hi, my name is Erin Ahern. I'm a producer at Obsidian Entertainment, currently working on an unannounced project. Previously at Obsidian, I worked on The Outer Worlds, doing a bunch of localization, as well as the 2 DLCs, Peril on Gorgon and Murder on Eridanos. And yeah, it's great to be here. Thank you.
Awesome. That was very concise. Did you have that written down beforehand?
No, I've just done a bunch.
Oh, okay. Wow. I'm done. Caleb Diaz.
Hi, I'm Caleb. I also work at Obsidian and also a producer as well. I started my, foray into the industry with Obsidian mostly as a QA tester and worked my way up. I've also have a couple of titles under my belt: Pillars of Eternity 2, Grounded, Outer Worlds, and all the Outer World DLC. And I'm also currently on an unannounced project. So it's been quite a time, but it's been a fun time in the industry for sure.
Awesome. And next up, we have Dr. JC Lau.
Hi, I'm JC. I am a producer at Harebrained Schemes in Seattle. So I previously worked on BattleTech there. And before that, I was at Bungie, where I worked on Destiny 2 and its first year of DLCs. And before that, I was at Xbox, where I worked on console stuff. So no game titles there. I'm also on the board of directors for the Seattle chapter of the SGDA, and also on the board of directors of Global Game Jam. So that's me.
That's Dr. JC Lau. Next up, we have Larry Colvin. Who are you, Larry Colvin? What do you do?
Who are any of us, really? Hi, my name's Larry. I'm a producer at Phoenix Labs, currently on Dauntless. I've worked at Riot Games, a small studio called Game Circus, and then Gearbox Software. And that's it.
That's it. Oh boy. Okay. One thing that I like to, there are many icebreaker questions that have been used throughout time and space. My favorite that I like to ask is, what is your favorite game dev horror story that you can tell? Now think about it. I'll give you like. Okay, perfect. Larry, are you trying to figure out which one?
Yeah, that's what I'm like. There's a couple that come to mind.
Okay, anybody have one ready in your mind?
I can go. Yeah.
Okay,
I have one ready.
Perfect.
So one of the ones that stand out the most to me is while I was working on a project. This was while I was still in QA. We had a feature tied to our sequel of a game that was basically like to port over your information from the first game. It had gone largely untested for all the way up to almost ship. It was basically about to ship, and it was actually me that was like, hey, I don't know that this works. And it was kind of like, it was just a huge like last minute ditch effort to try to get that like working, because yeah, essentially this big feature that was basically the cornerstone of the sequel just hadn't been worked on or tested, and we had maybe a month to ship. So it was trying to just really rally, figure out how we're going to be working through that and get it like fixed and what we needed to tackle. It's the fastest I've been thrown like into the fire of, okay, we need to prioritize things, we need to figure out what can be done, we need to figure out damage control at the same time, because there's just so much that's happening when it's like at the end that we just had to be realistic with what's going on. So it was just really, really intense for me that this thing that was, like I said, just the main focus of what we're going to be doing was just like almost completely broken. But we did do pretty well. It didn't come out a completely like a success story, but we were able to do damage control, and then as like patches went on, get it fixed. So it was a huge learning experience.
It was a much smaller fire.
Yes, yeah. It was a much smaller fire. Definitely could have been way worse, but it was handled pretty well.
Okay, perfect.
Yeah, it was very scary.
All right, Larry, do you have yours yet?
I do. I do. It's so I worked in outsourcing, specifically art outsourcing for Riot for many years. And I don't remember if y'all remember the time when the skins didn't have the character portraits flip out. So if you played a skin in League of Legends, it would still be the base champion portrait, right? So one of the teams was like, oh, hey, we're gonna fix that. We're gonna take all of our skins, cut out the splashes, make sure that the skins, have their own unique portraits. I'm like, cool, that sounds great. And then I would say like 2 weeks into it, and they gave themselves a very tight deadline. About 2 weeks into it, they came to me and were like, Larry, the studio that we were working with fell through. And I'm like, okay, yeah, that happens. All right, they're just not hitting quality bar. Like they're kind of ghosting us on messaging. We have about 4 weeks to get roughly 3,000 assets done, those little portrait icons. Do you know anyone who could do that? I was like, so it took me a hot second, but we had built up a really good relationship with another outsourcing studio that did do our icons for other parts of the game. And I told them, hey, I'm very sorry. This is a very large ask. Would you be able to do this? And so we worked back and forth. They're like, well, if you give us like really clear documentation and like a step-by-step and have a dedicated dedicated feedback partner, right? Like we should be able to. So they rallied, like they usually had like 7 artists on their team for us. They rallied about 20 artists to come in and just burn through these 3,000 portraits. So that was, and it came in and it came out great and it was all fun and it's like a duck in water, right?
Okay. JC, I think you were ready last.
Oh my gosh, I have 2 and I'm trying to think about which one is.
Flip a coin.
Oh my God. Okay, so here's one. I worked on the base game for Destiny 2 back in, I think this was like 20. Oh my God, what is time?
Your mic went a little away from your face.
Sorry, 2016
There we go.
was when I was working on this, and my team was in charge of the first 4 missions of what ended up being the shipping game. And so there's this one mission where your character, like, you've lost all your like, super like, awesome powers or whatever, and you're trying to get them back, and you have to go through this particular space. And part of the space takes place in an area called the European Dead Zone, and there is a kind of little road you're supposed to go down, and then you have to crawl through like a bunch of debris and then go through like there's a path to get your powers back or whatever. On the road, there's a little guide box, and there are decals on the ground that tell you which side you're supposed to drive up. And I'm Australian, and we drive on the left. So I was like, you put the decals in the wrong way. And I actually introduced a bug into the game because I made the art team like reverse the direction of the arrows for how to drive into this area. And I was just like, this feels really wrong to me. And then like just when the arrows were actually correct, and then I was like, oh, like, okay, now like art team, sorry, like I got to reel this shit back. And we got it, and like, we were all trying to ship this like really big, like new, like it's like this big sequel product. And and I was just, and the reason like I can say, this is hilarious now, but at the time it was like, we're trying to ship this thing, we have a deadline, and I'm randomizing all these teams, and I'm just like, I am so sorry. Like, so.
And you were the producer. That was
I was actually in QA at the time, so that was, which makes it even worse because I was like, y'all made a bug, which I made, and yeah. But it's all right. The art teams were super gracious, and we got
okay, that's good.
After I just messed with them for 2 weeks, apparently. So
nice artists. All right, Aaron.
Yep, I got one. It's a localization bug, actually.
Ooh, the best.
So I think we're on the Outer Worlds. I think we're about a month to Gold Master. So like super tight deadlines for shipping, getting the final like pieces in for localization. We 10 different languages. And there was one day where I got a bug saying, we can't test the Korean localization because every single character in the game had turned into the character for Tofu. So I'm working with our UI artist and our programmer to figure out what exactly happened. And it took
so everything just says tofu on
everything.
all the signs?
Everything said tofu. Yeah.
Got
So
it.
like characters would talk
Tofu
in the
gun.
subtitles. It was the tofu bug. So for about a week and a half, me and these two guys are trying to figure out what the heck happened. And it turned out when we updated our Unreal, it took the font that we were using for Korean and just nullified it. So we had to find a new font that was accepted, that we could get the licensing to, and then pop that in the credits, make sure that was localized for legal reasons, and then like call it a day. So at the time it was extremely stressful, but looking back to it, it was actually quite a funny time.
It is interesting that when Unreal doesn't have a specified font, it defaults to tofu.
At least in Korean, I couldn't tell you why.
Okay.
But that's what it does.
Interesting. All right. So now that we know each other a little bit more and the fires we've all narrowly escaped, let's get into a little bit more about what production is and whatnot. So for a lot of people that haven't worked specifically in games or even like in a entertainment team, they don't necessarily understand like what the role of a producer is on a team. So how would you define your role as a producer, and what do you do specifically on a day-to-day basis? And I can call on somebody if nobody feels.
I can go.
Aaron?
Oh,
Yep.
go ahead. Yeah.
Go.
I would say producers are kind of like the glue. We do everything that devs and artists don't want to do to make the game, to ship the game on time.
Mm-hmm.
So it's scheduling meetings for people to talk and brainstorm, making tickets for folks to, actually, create assets and pipelines, and then day-to-day problem solving. So I'll have devs come up to me and say, hey, what am I supposed to do on XYZ? And I'm like, well, let's take a look at this. And so I'll go with them and make sure we get, the proper information for them. So a big thing for production is, making sure our game ships on time and have as few of communication issues as possible.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I can
great.
just echo off of that. Aaron basically said it all, but yeah, like I guess on paper, like the idea is we need a producer basically needs to maintain the scheduling. So as Aaron said, we need to make a game, and it's really about those checks and balances to reel in or extend what needs to do to get that, to realize that goal. And there's a lot of different ways that I've seen producers handle that. Like some are very cut and dry and will just say, okay, here's the schedule at hand. Here's the time we're over estimated on. We need to bring that in. What are we cutting? Some are very cut oriented. I myself like to work with the devs and just say, hey, okay, here is the graph of how we are over scoped. What can we do to reel it in? Like, where can we pull it? Where can we trim the fat? I like that approach just because it's more of a team effort. But there's no real wrong way to do things. As a producer, you kind of find what works for you and your team, because there's just so many factors that come into working just on different teams. And Aaron talked a little bit about that too. It's just like, if it's a big team, sometimes you can't talk to everybody really quickly, or there's just so many chefs in the kitchen kind of deal. Or with a more smaller intimate team, you really develop those bonds. And you can
on a bigger team, it seems like you almost need to figure out which chefs to talk to.
Most definitely. Like sometimes using the chain of command is really well, but then there's also, like, for me, for instance, too, there's a lot of interpersonal communication that I have to navigate. So it's, about knowing who to talk to in those instances that are right, but not burning any bridges with somebody that may have feel like ignored or whatnot. So yeah, a producer wears a lot of hats. Like I said, on paper, fundamentally, that's what we do, is maintain the schedule. But especially for me, most of my job is honestly just being like, hey man, how you doing today? Like, are you doing great? Or like, just anything that I can do to, there's so many facets to like get that. It's not just, like, for me anyway, a cut and dry deal. So yeah, that was a lot of words to say. I do a lot of different things as a producer.
It's good. It was good.
Yeah, I'm actually going to jump on that thing that
Jump on it.
Caleb just said about teams, because I think So like it is true on paper, like there's that one liner that's the producers
Maintain schedules and
yeah,
backlogs.
you ship on time and under budget and at quality, and you don't burn out your team. And there's a thing in production called the iron triangle and like very high theory like project management. And it's like, you know, you have your triangle and you've got your budget and your scope, and you have to like manipulate to see what you can do best. But fundamentally it's about managing your team. We talked a little bit about D&D right before this session started, and I like to think about producers as you're a multi-classing tank, fighter, and a bard and a cleric. And I don't know what that
hard to
role
multi-class.
would look like. That's a really weird multi-class, but
yeah.
But fundamentally, you're doing these three things. You have to fight for your team and advocate for them.
You have to be able to
like
give inspiration.
Yeah, you give them inspiration, you sing their praises, and you have to support them in their work and help pick them up when they're just like, oh my god, this project is going to shit.
Yeah.
What do I do? So
you're a little bit of a spellcaster. You got to move people over to the right points in combat.
There's a lot of battlefield control that producers do as
well.
So
yeah,
we're wizards as well.
I'm really liking this analogy more and more.
Yeah, but fundamentally, it's about your team. So I think the main skill that you have to have as a producer is actually empathy. Like it's cool you can do spreadsheet stuff and move stuff in Jira or whatever, but you have to be a person that is good with other people and can communicate with other people, can negotiate with them, can empathize with them. And I think a lot of what my day-to-day work is really comes down to that. It's just like, you know, when I'm in a meeting and I'm like planning like what we're going to do next, or, you know, oh no, we're over scoped, what can we dial back on? Like, you know, people get really precious about some of their work and you don't want to like step on their feelings, but you have to be like, the reality is we got to do something about like the fact we're over scoped. And so it's kind of like having that emotional intelligence to be able to navigate different personality types while still maintaining a successful like project and project team, I think is at the heart of what we do.
Cool. Anything to add, Larry?
I'm just gonna say +1. No, we go the easy
ditto.
Something at Phoenix Labs that we talk about, and the way we kind of help teams understand the areas of focus that some of the other less like direct contributor disciplines. So for instance, as a producer, right, it's hard to say like, what do we do? Well, we do a lot of stuff. We don't have anything like, here, this is what I did, right? You can hand them something. So at certain studios, you'll have a product owner who kind of sets the vision, and we say they understand the why, the what and the why. And then producers, we tend to live in the realm of who and when. So if we are coming up on a project and they're like, hey, this is a very engineering heavy project, what are our engineers like schedules looking like right now? To touch on maybe some of the smaller teams, like especially if you have to share engineering resources, where it gets really complicated. we're going through that right now, where we have a gameplay engineer who is really talented in animation tech, and we have a project coming up that is very animation tech heavy. But there's another team that's ramping up, and they also have a very similar need. So now, as producers, we don't really get to make that decision, right? Like, no, they have them. That's another set of people, but we have to be able to surface that to say, hey, here are these two teams with these two needs. Like, we can't share them. We've tried to work out scheduling. It's not going to go through. So we raise a lot of those like aspects that people don't think about whenever they're making video games, right? Like they're in it, they're in the weeds. I always like to call myself, I'm like one part coach, one part cheerleader, one part physical trainer. Like that's like, and that's how I try to balance that and get teams organized and basically being the best team that they can be, like just make that space for them to shine.
One part coach, one part cheerleader, one part physical cheerleader. They call me Larry.
Yeah,
there you go.
That's right. There you go.
Autobiography. All right. So, but based on all that, so we went a little bit about your day to day. All of you have been in the industry for a little bit, and I think all of you are coming up or are past the 5-year mark of what's usually considered like when turnover can happen. For people that are just getting into the industry, producers, entry-level producers, the young ones, the bright-eyed, bushy-tailed ones, their responsibilities may differ than somebody that is like in terms of not necessarily their intentions, because I think the intentions of a producer generally remain consistent. But the entry level ones, they have different responsibilities. What responsibilities might a junior expect compared to a senior, and how could they prepare for that?
The thing that sticks out in mind very quickly is scope or breadth of responsibility. Any associate producer that's going to come onto a team will have either a specific squad or one or two squads of maybe four people max that they are responsible for, that they will shadow and help support. And normally that associate is tied to or reports into a senior or a senior producer. Those producers or senior producers now have like 2 or 3 teams of maybe 10 to 16 people that they will oversee. And then as you go up a senior producer, like our senior producers works or covers the entire product of Dauntless. And then our director of production covers all the products. And so it's this kind of laddering. But for me, the way I would describe it is it's depth and breadth of visibility or responsibility. So
cool. I'm just gonna go JC Lau.
Yeah.
Anything out on that?
I would say that's pretty much how I've experienced production. Like as like, you know, with a project, you break it, like for us, we break it down into feature sets, and the size and complexity of those features will be different. So like, you know, for something that's has a relatively well-defined pipeline, like, you know, some of the art assets, like, you know, we know how to produce an art asset, like a character. We know how to get a character into the game. You know, you have like concept art, then you have to model it, and then you have to like rig and skin it and animate it. Like, you know what those steps are. Like that might be something that someone more junior can do because that's better defined. And then like for someone that's mid-level senior, you might have things that just have much more like complexity or unknowns like built into it. So for me, like I'm kind of like mid-level. And when I started, it was like, you know, here's a very straightforward pipeline and you just have to make the thing go through the pipeline. And now it's like, cool, you're working with like, you know, 2 different tech teams, like, and you work with the engine, and the engine is doing all this weird stuff. And so it's like, okay, I also have to build out this pipeline and then put things through it and see if that works. And then like retrospect and make sure that like, you know, make sure we can develop those systems, because then like over time, I want to be able to make something straightforward that so that anyone else who comes in can handle that and that sort of stuff. So it's kind of like you do more of the like building the pipelines and laying out the tracks and that sort of stuff. And then, you know, I'm also touching like things like budget, which is super fun because I'm just like I'm like in spreadsheets forever. And that's the other thing about producers, you have to like spreadsheets in some sense of that. Like
you have to know Excel.
Yeah. But yeah, so like learning how to manage a budget is a thing that is a skill that you develop as you go up through the ranks and get more responsibility as well.
I do want to go off that before we continue around. I think I want to focus the question, because I want to focus it towards the perspective of the students, because understanding the difference between junior and senior is well and good, but I think more what my intention of the question was, which is not your guys' fault because you answered the question that I asked. The question I think I meant more to ask is for somebody that just wants, you know, get an entry-level production job or a QA position that they want to say, I want to go into production, and they want to show that intention. What are the core skills that you want to see in their resume or their portfolio that shows they have the core skills that say, I can't teach, and they have some of the ones that I can, and they have enough that I feel comfortable that they can learn the rest while they're here. Cool. What are those core skills? So I'll start with Erin since you haven't spoken yet.
Sure. I think some of the major ones are, you know, obviously communication. I want you to be able to tell me exactly what's going wrong if you're, you know, working with 1 or 2 devs. Clearly, so we can like solve the problems. If they are a problem solver, that's one of the things that we do a lot is, you know, we're having issues here, here, and here. What's the best way we can do it, or at least bring it up to somebody who knows how to fix it. And then actually, like any of the soft skills, any other soft skills. So I took to prepare for my production industry role, I took a business writing course, so I could learn how to format all my emails correctly, memos, and kind of just get solidify that way of communicating, that skill. Because I send out hundreds of emails, hundreds. And so you need to make sure you have all the information you need in there, super, and have it be as clear as possible, so that anybody reading it, no matter what background they have, kind of understand what's going on.
So it sounds like to me, in the way that somebody would show that portfolio resume, be like, I actually worked with the team. Say they're in college, they worked on a game development team, whether in club or class, and they were the person who made sure everything stayed on track, and they can tell you stories about like where they problem solved.
Yeah, if they have that on the resume, that's fantastic. If they don't have opportunities to be part of game development teams, other ways to show you have a leadership skill is, would be good. I did a leadership or a orientation leader thing once at UC Davis, to kind of gather that small group support and that experience. So yeah, I'm sure other folks probably have other things that they'd want to see on a portfolio. So I'm going to stop talking because I can also talk forever.
Well, that was good. That was good. Caleb.
So especially for somebody that's coming into college and is green, a lot of the terms you might have been hearing are maybe a little bit out of your scope. That's why asking questions is honestly fantastic. If you're coming into, like, if you want to get into a like some of us come from QA here right now, it's a fantastic like entry level position to start learning your way into the gaming industry if you just don't know what you're doing. If you are interested in production, the things that can help your resume or help you get there is, again, just taking things that show you have that analytical mind, or have just, you can like put forth the idea that you understand what it takes to kind of be a team player. So ways to do that without, because the big problem is, cool, it sounds like I need to have experience, but how do I get that without having experience? There's a lot of really good ways. You can take like, if you've all heard of things like the DISC assessment or behavior self-assessment tests, you can take things like that, and it kind of like will almost plot out the way you think. And really, any way you like land on those sort of assessment tests, you can kind of use that to cater. And a lot of times when they give you the feedback, it says, this is the kind of mind you have. Every single mind is helpful on a team. And especially when it comes to production. And so those are good ways to say, hey, I've done this in preparation for production. If experience is hard, honestly, just look to see if people are making games. We've talked about game jams here. I forget who did, but those are fantastic ways, especially in college. You always have somebody that's like, hey, I'm working on this project. Like just tune into those. Just like those real world experience things that just show you, it's not so much leadership as you understand that like deadline or crunch, or like as mentioned,
you understand the game you're playing.
And understand what it means to be a team player. Because again, I'll echo the sentiment again. Being a team player and understanding how to navigate with working with people, that's a huge part of being production. So just really, when it comes to your resume, saying those things, showing those things, it could even be in, if you're working a part-time job now through college, you can just use your resume to cater it toward that. It's actually really easy. And when we do like production for like our internships, that's the things we're mainly looking for, is just to say, okay, do they just kind of at least get the grasp or the general gist of it? And if they've taken those extra steps of, yeah, I did a game jam, or me and my friends just wanted to try making an app and see how that went. So those are pretty effective ways, I think, to start, because it is a loaded question. It's pretty difficult.
Yeah,
there's no one right answer.
It is, and that's why we're all here.
Yeah.
Larry, you're up.
Very much communication, yes, very much so. I actually struggle with being concise. That's my thing, because I think everything is important, because that's the way my brain works, right? I try to take in all of the aspects and then drill down and identify what those are. So very much so on those two. The two things though that I think have become incredibly important for me is understanding the growth mindset and having that, being able to show that. That is kind of for me an indicator of a good, healthy mindset in general, like learning from one's mistakes, understanding how to apply that into the next project or problem going forward. And that's, I think, something too that like people will be like, oh, the resume needs to show everything I've done right. No, we've all failed. We've all failed. And it's important to show that when you failed, what lessons did you learn? And if you can do that in your resume, it'll jump out to me. The other thing is psychological safety. That's something that's become near and dear to me as a producer, and anyone who shows an effort to, one, understand what that means. I'm not going to tell you what it is. You get to go read it, look up psychological safety, and creating that space. Remember, we were talking about creating a space for the team to shine. There are a lot of elements within that philosophy or that approach that does a good job of dovetailing into what a producer does and how a producer can help a team succeed. So any ways that you can show those on your resume will jump out at me. As a tip for resume writing though, look up the STAR method. That's the thing that I always tell people. STAR method. Don't tell me what you did. I made spreadsheets. That's nice. Everybody makes spreadsheets, right? Like that's okay. But if you say, I made a spreadsheet that tracked our budget spending and helped my senior producer identify overspends more quickly, now you're telling me what you provided, what impact did you have on a team? And then I go, yes, that's actually, that's something that we have a problem with. Our budgets get a little, wonky, and we have to go back and re-scrub through that. So if we have someone who's actively thinking about that, maybe that'll help us out, right? Like, tell me what impact you had. And using the STAR method is actually a really good way of doing that. So a little tip for writing your resume.
Hot tip.
Yeah, I liked all those answers. I'm glad you went last, because that was very good.
I don't think JC's gone yet.
I was saying,
okay.
JC.
Yeah. Well, what's going there, Caleb?
Well, she answered the earlier one. That's on me.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, but that, like what Caleb just did, it's like you will make mistakes, and knowing how to own up to them is important. So
thank you for that example, Caleb.
Most of my day is making mistakes and rolling back on it. So a good thing of producers.
You have to be really good at doing that and still have people like you. At the end of the day.
But this is a really big piece, I think, about being a producer. So I know Aaron talked about demonstrating skill sets from other areas that aren't necessarily specifically I produced a game at the end. So I think there are all kinds of projects across your life that are relevant for developing your production skills. Like, have you ever organized any kind of event? Have you volunteered with any kind of organization? Have you been on a sports team? Like that sort of stuff. These are all areas where you can develop like these very fundamental soft skills that you need for production, like working as a team, like collaborating with people, knowing how to communicate with people with different personality types. Like they're like, you will come across assholes in the games industry at some point, and you need to know how to navigate like your conversations and how you interact with them in a way that will still get mutually like useful outcomes for your project. So, knowing how to negotiate with people and organize things and get projects, regardless of whether or not the game ones, to like the finish line, those are all important skills. And one thing I think we kind of touched on that I really want to like plus a bajillion is that wanting to learn and knowing how and when to ask for help. So as a producer, you will never be the expert in the room. You will be talking to artists, and artists will tell you about a whole bunch of technical stuff they're doing. You'll be talking to engineers, and like they'll just tell you a bunch of stuff. So when I started in production at Harebrained, I was actually what we call the core tech producer, which is like the tools and engine team. And I remember the first time we had a meeting, like I was the only like non-engineer in the room, and people were talking about a bunch of stuff, and I had to Google like I was like, I understand about like 60% of the words coming out of your mouth. Let me just Google a bunch of stuff, and that way I could learn and be a better producer for them. But I was also just like, what the hell is an API? Like after the fact, because I just didn't know. But you have to know when to ask questions, because when you ask questions, you will get better information that will help your teams do better. And so having the humility and like sense of, it's okay that I don't know everything, and it's actually good that I don't know everything, because I need my teams to inform me because they're the experts, is a skill that is really useful to develop as well.
Actually,
There's two things there.
go ahead, Larry.
I'll say there's two things there that JC said. Understanding the power of I don't know, or can you explain that to me, is amazing, right? Simon Sinek is a great great YouTube, right, personality. He does a lot. One of his talks is talking about like say I don't know, right? Can you explain that to me? And the benefits of that are just super tangible in production. The other thing that JC said that I had an epiphany about is whenever what can I do as a green producer? What can I do to show on my resume? If you've ever had a time where you had to get a group of people to do something, that's production. Like just flat out, just tell me how you did it.
Yeah.
Right. So organizing, I organize my family trips, right? Or hey, like my wife would make an amazing producer, because when she goes to Disney World, or when we go to Disney World, just like it's amazing. I have the best time. I don't know how we feel about swearing. I don't do anything, right? Like I just go along for the ride. All right. I don't do shit, right? She just takes over, and I have a great time, and she gets our group together and goes through all these things. So just anything like that where we were saying I have a group of people that may not necessarily know how to work with each other, or want to work with each other, or have different skill sets, and I got them to go and make this thing. Just tell me about that.
Awesome.
And then two things real quick. One, can I go to Disney World with you next time you go?
Hey, hit me up. Yeah, hit me up.
Sweet. Two, I remember when I was a production intern, and I thought I was supposed to know how long it took to make a character model, like how long it took to make an area. And I actually made myself extremely nervous. And just being able to, as you know, the lovely panelists with me have said before, to, you know, it's okay to not to know that information. Go to the people who do and say, all right, speak producer for me, dumb it down a lot. Like tell me how to.
I've had a producer tell me it's okay to be the dumbest person in the room.
Yeah.
That was their mindset.
Yeah.
As long as you can get the smart folks connected, then you're good to go.
Yeah. And in my experience, almost everybody is more than willing, because there's the worry that you're going to say that and they're going to be like, well, get out, dumb person. What are you doing here? It's never been ever. I've been in a room with directors. I've been in a room with the scariest personalities possible. And they're usually like, oh yeah, no, this makes sense. So, and they'll break it down. So it is something that usually just happens.
And it goes back to like sometimes by having them break it down, they realize, oh, you know what? We forgot a step. Like we didn't go through all of our, because we're up here, we didn't go through these steps. So, oh yeah, no, let's make a note of that. And it really is helpful.
Yeah, there's this, I like to do the explain it like I'm 5 thing. And then I do this kind of follow up where I'm just like, okay, I'm just going to ask a bunch of questions like, why are you doing it this way? Or like how, what is the actual process that you're doing for this? Because I'll just be like, oh, sometimes like when people get really technical with stuff, they'll just kind of say some stuff that you understand, and then there's this bit in the middle that's just like the blank nodding and smiling section, and then stuff comes out at the end, and you have to be prepared to drill down into the like black box of, I don't get this, like tell me how this works. And you don't have to be an expert. Like your goal is not to learn the ins and outs of like any particular tool that someone else might be using, but you just need to know enough to be able to do your job. So it's asking questions like, why are you doing it this way? Like, or what, or like what's going on here? Or like, how come you're doing like, whatever. Like those are totally legit questions to ask. And like, usually like if you're working with a team and they know you're trying to help them, then they will be more than willing to like explain stuff to you.
When is the best time to ask questions?
When you don't know.
Are there
It's like-
Wow.
Not
So
Okay.
what a good
Sorry.
question you've asked. It's thin. I find it's very much like you kind of have to read the room. Like if it's a something that's going on with like production, or like you're working on a pipeline, earlier might be better, because you want to make sure, as Larry said, you want to get it in where if they're not thinking of something, it'll like trigger that aha moment for them. But there's sometimes too when it's like a meeting talking about like a feature. For me, for instance, we'll talk about a bunch of things and I'll just write down my questions for after, just to make sure that like it's like, because you don't want to stop the creative flow sometimes. But I think it's difficult. I don't know. I find mine mostly at the end of a meeting when I have questions.
Yeah. There's Craig Ferguson, wonderful comedian, but he has something that changed my life. He was talking about like, whenever I want to say something, and this goes for questions as well, I ask myself three things. Does this need to be said, or does it need to be asked? Does this need to be said right now? Or does this need to be said right now by me? And having that breakdown and understanding, very much like reading the room, you're like, okay, right? Yes, it should be said, but it's in the middle of this saying, I'll write it down. Okay, right? Like, cool, right? Or yes, that's something that should be said. It probably should be said right now, but that's not something I'm supposed to be looking at. I'll follow up with them later, right? Like there is that, those three questions have really helped me figure out the timing, if you will.
That was great.
One question that I will always ask in a meeting, especially when we're breaking down tasks, is who's gonna do this?
Yeah.
Yes.
Everybody. Because I find that we have good ideas on what we want to do, when we want to do it, but then it comes down to, okay, who's gonna do this? And then they're like, I'm like, somebody, there's a chunk of work. Who's gonna normally we can figure out in those meetings, but that is a question that I will always ask to interrupt a meeting, so we can close the book on that and have that as a future plan.
Do you ever have the people that we're talking about it point at each other?
Yes.
It's like, oh, they're good. But wait, wait. Right? Yeah.
Everyone's like, not it.
And then everybody's like, but you're so good at that. No. That last thing you did, I thought that was amazing. That's great. Okay. I'm gonna try to squeak in an audience question before we go to peace out. But question: how much of your career have you worked with what you would consider at least good or even adequate production / management? How typical do you figure that is throughout pro game devs? And this could also segue into what qualities do you appreciate or not?
Wow, not starting with the easy ones, are we? Just
No.
Straight for that spicy.
Yeah.
Gotta squeak in the
Straight
spicy.
for the spicy. Okay. All right.
You want to go there? You already talking?
Yeah, so I would say that every manager or every studio that I've been at has had its good and bad things. And I think that's really the hard thing to realize, is that no one's perfect. No studio is perfect. They all have either their blind spots or their weak points, but every single one has a strong thing that you're going to be able to learn from. It's just identifying when those not so strong things are harmful to you, because there are times when it is harmful. Between Riot and Phoenix Labs, very different cultures, very different things. But I would say Riot taught me a lot about high level thinking and being critical. And that's super important. A lot of great skills come from that. I did not feel as supported as an individual or in my own career, because, well, Riot's like 3,000 people and there's a whole bag into that. But like, here at Phoenix, I feel incredibly supported and incredibly challenged, but in a very safe way. So linking back to psychological safety, when I first started, I was like, yeah, I'm a big bad producer. I came from Riot. I know what I'm doing. And then I was like, there's the 3 teams that need your help. And I'm like, okay. And it was like about a month and a half in, I'm going, wow, like this is okay, all right. And I'm like, I'm kind of half-assing 2 things and helping this out, and there's a lot of stuff going on, and I didn't ask for help. I fell into that trap. I'm a big bad producer. I should be able to do this. And then my manager and the director of production came in and was like, hey, Larry, we know you've been having some issues. Talk to us. What's going on? Right. And I was like, it's just, and I'm trying to figure it out. And they're like, hey, it's all right. Like, that's okay. Just let us know before. We know this is a lot of work. We know that we kind of threw you into the deep end, and we recognize what we did wrong, and we're going to adjust that. And so for you, the next time, if you start getting in over your head, just let us know. We're here to help you. And I was like, wow, that's not something you hear everywhere. You know what I mean? So that's what I would say in terms of good or bad production management. Like, as a whole package, no one's perfect. Just recognize the things that are good and latch onto those, but also be very cognizant and not afraid to say, sorry, but I need to go somewhere else if it's being like harmful to you. I'm going to plug that. Producers are people too.
Some people don't think so, but
I thought we were machines.
Yeah.
This is news to me.
Let's go cyborg, right? Like a little
budget
bit above.
balance. Okay, sure. They're part people too. All right. Anybody feel particularly strong? Or am I going to call?
So I've only really ever done production at Obsidian, and so the strong and weak of Obsidian for me is pretty simple. It's that Obsidian has been around for a long time already, so they have a well, especially in the our senior production, of just really good knowledge of how things were. And so like the dev process, the like engineering process, like especially for me, anything with programming is it's a scary world for me, because again, it's very tech heavy. It's all like terms that get thrown out of me that I'm just like, I'm not operating with a full like glass of like water here. So they throw things at me. I'm just like, I don't know what you've just said. So it's nice having that resource because of that. I would say the weakness, because Larry hit it, there's good and bad about everything, is that it's the double-edged swords, because since they've been so established, there's a hard line of this is how things were, so it's right, which isn't necessarily the case.
True.
Yeah, especially now when I would say the industry is making a lot of very good leaps toward a positive direction. It sometimes clashes. So just like Larry said, it's about understanding where to like pick the good fruit out of that, while maintaining like, okay, there's still a front there that's like unknown territory that I just have to be cognizant of. So that's what I would say for Obsidian and me.
Go ahead, Jason.
Okay, yeah, I was just gonna say real quick, Bungie was similar. Just it's a studio that's been around for almost 30 years, and it makes a very particular type of product. And so, there's like these really established processes and practices for how you make this type of game. And so I think there's this thing where it's like, as you go into different areas of productions or different studio sizes or different studio cultures, like you will come across what counts as good production management in different places. All of those are totally valid. It's like there's this whole thing about like what fits for you and what works for you, and as Larry said, if it doesn't work for you, it's okay to walk away. But there's, I think, generally this kind of shift that we've been seeing in production and just how production works in the last 5-6 years. So there's been this very strong mindset about caring about the product and getting the product over the line, and you have to ship the thing, and if you don't, then you have somehow failed or whatever. And we've been shifting from that into, instead of just the product is the first like primary and only thing, we're looking more at now the team is this thing that you need to care about, because this is people speaking up about crunch, or people speaking about like toxic studio cultures. These are all like parts of that shift into caring about the team, because the team is made up of people, and fundamentally, if you don't have people making your game, then you don't have a game. So I think part of good production management is also being cognizant of that shift and driving your studio or your team's culture into a way that is supportive of them as humans.
I've heard it said that a team ships a product, a producer ships a team.
Yes.
Yeah.
It sounds nice. Stuck to my brain.
I would rather cut a feature than have somebody burn out. Like just right. Because we're having the goal of, at least for me, is to have good relationships with folks and have them be proud of their work and have, enjoy their work, but also enjoy their life. So I am of the mindset of, oh, we're not going to get something done on time. Look at the triangle. If we can't fix it that way, all right, where's the chopping block? Because I'd rather have, an artist, happy and not burnt out than get something done on time.
What are like the flags you look for like, if I do this, like likelihood for them burning out is going to just be that much higher?
It really depends on, I think, the individual. So I know some folks who are, who will just say, all right, I know this is my end time. I'm going to go home. I'm fine. I'm not worried about those folks. I'm worried about the folks who are like, I want to make this perfect no matter what anybody says, and just take it and get better and better. And those are the people, like, I don't know, you have to check perforce like check-ins, and like, if you're checking in something at 10 o'clock at night, what are you doing, my dude? If they're, I reach out to them, say, hey, how's this going? And they keep giving me strange time frames that I know from experience that shouldn't take 3 days. It should probably take like 4 hours max. Something's going on wrong, either with the person in the pipeline, or there's other underlying issues. In which case, if I'm comfortable enough to approach them, I'll say, hey, let's chat, like drink some coffee. How's your life going? Or let their supervisor know that I think something might be wrong. It really depends on the relationship you have with the person.
Cool.
For me, it's always a trend. It's never that one thing. It's always a trend that you have to look out for.
They checked in at 10 p.m. that one night. They're doing that.
Yeah.
Every other night.
Yep. Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. I guess also where the I don't want to be like D&D references all over the place.
Do it.
We're like the data. We're
yeah.
the data wizards. Like, we're the people that look at how stuff works.
Data
Like,
wizards.
we take the data on like how fast the team can build a thing, or how, like, how long it takes for one particular person to do their tasks for a 2-week period or whatever it is, and we use that data to manipulate it, and we can use it to like make predictions about stuff. So we can always go back to like the data, and we use things like, there's task tracking software like Jira or whatever, and you can use that, and you can see if someone is not getting all their stuff done, like that might be a good indicator of some weirdness going on. Or if someone had been, like as Erin said, if someone had previously been estimating that it would take them like 4 hours to do a thing, and then like you go look at the tasks and like 2 weeks later it's still like in progress, then maybe something's going on there.
Sure.
Yeah. And I'm just gonna throw this out here real quick. Like, the last year with working from home in the pandemic has been a really interesting time to be a producer, because a whole bunch more stuff like this started happening. So I'm just gonna like leave this open for the rest of the panel to be like, I don't know how y'all managed it, but it was a lot of learnings for us. So yeah.
It was a lot of learning. It was a lot of learning, it was a lot of navigating. I will say I was happily surprised with how effective it was. For most of the team, obviously a lot of people are getting like stir crazy and just want to have that social interaction. But it is incredible that you can still push out a dev process of a game completely remotely. That's something that we as our studio didn't think possible. And when we kind of like got behind it, realized, oh, we can do this. It's a learning experience. There's a lot of things to navigate through and like figure out. But yeah, it's interesting that it can happen. Opened my eyes for sure.
Necessity is the mother of all invention.
Like, as a producer, like if your job is all about planning and making predictions, and then it's like, oh cool, everyone's working from home, and like when we started doing this in March, then everyone's task tracking just went to crap like right away. Like there was just so much there was like so much collective pandemic trauma that it took us like, we had to just check in with everyone, see how they were doing. We cut a bunch of like features just to be like, okay, let's have everyone's workload and start there and see how we go. And but it was a lot of just like managing your team and managing their functionality as people. Like a lot of our virtual, like, you know, stand-ups were just the first like half of it was just, how are you doing as a person?
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
now we can talk about tasks, but how are you doing? Yeah.
Man, okay.
What was it?
This is
Oh.
one thing I hate about doing panels is usually it's like it takes about 40 minutes to get that engine revving, and then by the time it's going, it's like it's a sustainable thing. The conversation can go for another 3 hours, and it's like, oh man, I'm really feeling it now. This is great. This is good. And then I get a message from Jason. It's not his fault. He's running a machine, and I used to run this machine too. So and I'm like, we got to cut it off. So if you guys could be quick, succinct. I know you're working on this, Larry, so I believe in you.
Thank you.
Yeah. What would your closing remarks be to people who want to be producers, the producers of the future, and we'll sign off.
Quickly reach out, use your networks, use like LinkedIn and whatnot. If you see somebody that you idolize or is just like in the role that you want, don't hesitate to just at least be like, hey, I'm interested in what you do. Is there any help and advice you can give? That's a really good quick way to go about it. But honestly, just try. The problem I had is I didn't think I was good enough for the industry, and so I just didn't try to like get my way in the industry. And it was when I finally just applied myself that you can find something. And so if you are interested in production, definitely just keep trying, keep applying places, do what you need to get it done, because it can totally happen. If I can become a producer, anybody can become a producer, is what I say.
Stop it, Caleb. Stop it. All right. Jump on
do your
anybody.
research. I'll say, do your research, right? Like, go out there, understand, like, if you don't, like, you know, JC said, if someone said in a book or on a stream or in a article, you're like, I don't know what that means, go do your research, ask, poke around, right? And then exactly what Caleb said, do it, right? Just Shia LaBeouf, right? What's the worst that's going to happen? Literally, what's the worst that's going to happen? Yeah, and then like keep trying. It takes time, so be kind and patient with yourself. But yeah, those would be the big three for me.
I like that you said do your research, because that's the second half of asking questions. You can't just ask the question. There's a follow-up you got to do. You got to actually figure out what the answer is half the time. So, all right, moving on.
Two things real quick. One, reach out to your professors. If any of them are, you know, taking any game classes, see if they're interested in doing like an independent study thing. I did that, and it actually helped me make like a run pie and a Bitsy game. And so I got to learn a bit of that pipeline. Two, figure out what kind of game you want to make. If you want to make an RPG, Obsidian's a good place to go. If you want to make a, you know, League of Legends game, Riot's the way to go. They're doing so much with other stuff, so that's why I said League of Legends in general. But do some of that research of what game you might want to be making in the industry.
I just want to kind of plus one everyone, but also there are all different types of producers, and production is very different at different places. So at some places you might be here you are now wearing 50 hats and you have to do all the things, and that's a great way to learn all the things. At some other places, like in some AAA studios, you might get siloed into like being the localization producer or the cinematics producer, and that's kind of your lane. But if you don't know what kind of production you want to do, or like if you want to do production at all, like there is no harm in trying all the things. It's like there is a like giant buffet of like skills and roles in production, so just like do all the things and see what you like, and do more of the stuff you like and do less of the stuff you don't like. So but in order to get there, like we talked about not being afraid to ask for help. Like don't be afraid to ask, and it's not just for help, just for anything. Like, you know, if you have questions, if you have like, you know, people you want to connect with or whatever, like we're all on the internet, and everyone, and that's how we can all connect. So yeah, ask.
Ask. Do not be afraid. This has been the production panel for the SGDA Summit 2021. Your panelists, Caleb Diaz, Larry Colvin, JC Lau, Eric K. Hearn, and I have been your moderator, Peter Doria, signing off.